Ladies and gentlemen, I've received a donation asking about reading books. What's the most effective way to understand a book? What is my method? And how much should you put into a book? So basically there are two issues or questions there. How do you understand a book? And how hard should you try to do that? And I thought about this for a while, and it turns out that, though I hadn't really thought about it before, there are three different methods I use when I'm reading a book. And it depends on my goal or my motive, what I'm trying to do. So there are three different ways, but first I want to say that I don't always read a book from cover to cover. Sometimes I only need chapter 4. Or sometimes I just read the first few chapters, and then I don't. Like, for example, A History of the Middle Ages. You read the first chapter or two, that's it. Like, it has to start out with the history of the ending of Rome. Read the first 2 chapters, and then you've got everything you need out of that book. And etc. You don't always need to read the entire book. It's not an obligation. You want to know about the oil industry in the 1860s? You read 2 or 3 chapters in Rockefeller's biography. You don't have to read his entire biography. You see what I mean? So the other stuff's interesting, but it's not necessary. And when you've got 1,000 books that you need to sample from in your lifetime, you don't need to read every single bit of every book. That's the first thing I'll say. But when you do read a book, or part of a book, what's the method that you should use, and how hard should you try to understand it? How much effort should you put into understanding it? Now, I have 3 methods I use, 3 different levels, depending on what I'm going to do with the book. Probably only 2 of these are really applicable to most of the audience, and maybe just most of the audience could get along with 1. My 3 levels are, I'm just reading the book and I'm going to put it down and then I'm done with it. Or, level number 2, I'm reading it and I might come back to it later as an educational tool because I'm operating a school and I think that it might be something that will fit into the overall story of a curriculum at some point. And a lot of that stuff has come back to be useful stuff I've marked in that way. And number 3, reading it, digesting it line by line, sentence by sentence for YouTube. That's most likely not most people. Let me give you an example of the last one, and then we'll leave it behind. This is a method of really chewing and understanding a book. Nothing is left outside of this sort of digesting, as it were. If every single sentence has to be gone over, you end up with things. You can see here where I put that little curve before that word. That means it starts there, goes down to there. This page is extremely marked up. I take out parts over to the side. I have the parts put in long red bars. That's an extremely labor-intensive way to understand a book. You get a lot out of the book, but it takes a lot of time. And you have to have a purpose in mind. If you set about doing this type of editing with no purpose, my purpose is, what do I want to read to a camera on YouTube? That's my purpose. If you didn't have a purpose in mind, you wouldn't be able to do it. But to go into it that closely, say, what am I going to read to a class or something, if you're going to teach a class, or what would I want to do a video on? You mark the things you want to do a video on. So that's what I want to talk about now, is not quite so intensive of that level of reading. So I think that you should have a dictionary available at all times. That's how much that's how much effort you should put into reading a book. Any word you don't understand, you should look up in a dictionary as a general rule. It can't be a duty. Sometimes you can get the gist of the word from a sentence, but sometimes you come off awfully wrong that way. If the sentence says that the woman was very homely, a lot of people think that the word home is nice, and therefore homely would be nice, but homely actually means ugly. It's counterintuitive. Some things are like that, and sometimes you have to look up the word to get to know what's being said. So I think that a dictionary on hand is always good. I think that you should read a book with your attitude of how much do you want to learn about this subject sort of predetermined. Are you just learning about this subject because you need to write a paper for a class? So you're going to read this book, get some info out of it, and you're done. In that case, I just go along and mark vertical lines in the margins. Here's an example from Give War a Chance by P.J. O'Rourke. This area here is just outlined. No particular details on the fact that every sentence in there is good or not. And here's another example. Not every single sentence in there is worthwhile, but I've got the whole paragraph blocked. That's the way that you should make notes about it. Now, here's the thing I want to give rise to. These are the two levels on which I think most people will approach it. You see all these notes, and this is the open leaf, the first leaf. Notes about what I have on different pages. If you're just going to read it and put it on your shelf, you might not need to make these notes, but they're very, very nice. And I would take the time to make them if you only have a note every 5 or 10 pages. If you underline every other sentence, you cannot do that. Every 5 or 10 pages, and you'll sometimes cover the entire front leaf and in the margins here. And I've got books where I went onto the back, but not in this one. So I think that that's the level on which to approach it. Make notes, underline them, study paragraphs and pages and sections you don't understand. Try to get a book on something. If it mentions the importance of the battle at Salamis, and this is a book on British naval history, see if you can find a book on Salamis, which would probably be, Thucydides or something like that. It's not a duty to go into every facet of everything you study, but a good way to start about a book, and you can go back and redigest books, a good way to start is to make basic notes. And for example, Atlas Shrugged is one book I had that was really cover to cover had notes like that. So those are the levels on which I digest different books. You should put as much effort into it as you need to and want to. If it bores you, if you ever yawn, set the book down, come back to it if you can before you die. If not, so much the worse for that book, As long as you're studying and thinking and learning, you can't regret the fact that some things are outside of your sphere of interests. Some things won't be interesting to you, period. That's all there is to it. So study things you're interested in, never look at it as a duty, and study it on the level and in the depth that it requires for your situation. Make notes. Do not be ashamed of using ink. A lot of people use pencil because it's not permanent, and other people are horrified at the idea of writing in a book. But get those off your back if you're going to be a serious scholar. Read books, devour them, and digest them on the level that's appropriate for what you're trying to do. Hopefully you won't have to deal with them the way that I do, sentence by sentence, and taking out the word and editing out commas and stuff to bring the meaning across. But if you do, that's a really good way to digest them as well. I haven't quite gotten this far. This is what I'll finish on as a tidbit from Benjamin Franklin. I haven't quite gotten this far so that I will rewrite authors. But that's what Benjamin Franklin did, was he rewrote. He took authors of the past and rewrote their stuff. And he said, I thought sometimes I made an improvement on these gentlemen from the past. Well, I edit stuff out and talk about what remains. I haven't rewritten, but that, if you really, really want to get into something, that is the deepest level on which you can understand or appreciate a book or an essay, is to rewrite it in different words. And that's the ultimate. So there you go. That's what I have to say about that. I hope that answers the question.